Okay, so the word hamartoma. I know, it sounds a little intimidating, right? But what if I told you it often describes something as simple and common as a birthmark? In this explainer, we're going to demystify this term completely. You'll see it's not as scary as it sounds.
So let's start with something really familiar. I bet a lot of us have a birthmark like this, or we've definitely seen one on somebody else. But what is it really?
So on the surface, we call it a birthmark. But what's going on underneath? On a cellular level. Is it really just a simple birthmark, or could it be something more serious? That's the big question we're going to answer right now. All right, let's pull back the curtain and find out what this growth actually is. This is a hamartoma, and I want you to focus on two really important words here: benign and non-cancerous. That's the key takeaway. It's basically an overgrowth of cells and tissues that are totally normal for that part of the body. They're just not organized in the right way. The name itself gives us a huge clue. It comes from the Greek word hamartia, which means a fault or a defect, and that's paired with oma, which just means tumor. So think about it. It's not a malicious growth, it's more of a developmental fault or a little mistake. I absolutely love this analogy because it just clicks. It's perfect. Imagine you've got all the right building materials, the bricks, the wood, the wiring, but the contractor just kind of threw them together in a disorganized mess. The materials themselves are fine, they're normal. It's just the architecture that's all mixed up. And this brings us to the most crucial point of this whole thing. A hamartoma is a mistake. It is not a malignancy. So let's really break down the difference. Okay, this chart makes it so clear. On one side, you have the hamartoma. It's normal tissue, just jumbled. A malignant tumor, on the other hand, that's made of abnormal mutated cells. A hamartoma is an overgrowth of lots of different cell types, while cancer usually starts from just one single mutated cell that goes rogue. And here's the big one. Hamartomas are non-invasive and their growth is self-limited. They don't spread, and they usually just stop growing on their own. So let's just recap those key features real quick. Hamartomas are developmental. They're made of normal but disorganized local tissue. They're totally non-aggressive, usually show up in childhood, and this is important, their growth is limited. Bottom line, they are not true neoplasms, which are those new abnormal growths of tissue we think of with cancer.
Now, you might be thinking these are just things that happen on the skin, but nope, they can actually appear in a whole bunch of different parts of the body.
And, they can be found in some pretty surprising places. We're talking the mouth, the lungs, the heart, even the brain, nerves, and pancreas. It just goes to show you that this little biological mix-up can happen almost anywhere. And check this out. This shows the variety, even just on the skin. This is a sebaceous nevus on the scalp, and it's another kind of skin-based hamartoma. See how different it looks from that first birthmark we saw? And the variety doesn't stop there. It also extends to the types of tissue involved. You can have them involving your teeth, those are called odontogenic, or in connective tissue, or even blood vessels, like a hemangioma, neural tissue, muscle tissue, you name it. So, the big question is, do you need to worry about this? Well, it totally depends. The vast majority of hamartomas cause absolutely no symptoms at all and are often found completely by accident. Now, if one happens to grow in a tricky spot, yeah, it can cause problems. Like one in the lung might cause a cough, or one in the brain could potentially lead to seizures, but that's usually just because of the pressure it puts on everything around it. So, how do doctors figure out if you have one, and what's the outlook? Let's jump into our final section and find out. The process is usually pretty standard. It'll start with a clinical exam by a doctor. Then, depending on where it is, they might use imaging like an X-ray or an MRI to get a much better look. But the definitive answer, the gold standard, often comes from a biopsy. They take a tiny piece, look at it under a microscope, and boom, they see that disorganized but otherwise perfectly normal tissue. And here it is. This is the single most important message, and it is fantastic news. The prognosis is excellent. Hamartomas are almost always benign, and like we said, a lot of them cause no symptoms whatsoever. Because of that, treatment, if it's even needed in the first place, is typically very straightforward. Sometimes it's just watched to make sure it's not causing any trouble, or it might involve a simple surgical removal, especially if it's causing symptoms or, for cosmetic reasons.
So, if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this. A hamartoma is simply a biological mix-up. It's a jumble of normal parts. It is not a malicious mutation.
So, you see, a hamartoma is a perfect example of why we shouldn't judge a medical term just by how it sounds. Understanding what it really means can make all the difference, which kind of leaves me wondering, what other medical terms out there do you think are commonly misunderstood?